Hello students, welcome to the regression masterclass organized by the EcoCircle in conjunction with the Department of Economics. Our sir will be joining soon and just please wait patiently till he does so.
Yeah, yes. And I request all the students to be ready with their notebook and pen. If you have any problems, you can ask in between. You can ask your questions in the chat box. So I think Hatekar sir is generous enough to take your queries in between. Harshada, most of the students are from TY or it's a mixed group?
Oh, ma'am, we have students from FY, SY, and TY.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, sir is here.
Sir is here.
Okay. Welcome, sir.
Can you all hear me properly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, lovely. So, do we start?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So we'll just begin with a formal introduction and then we'll go ahead with the session.
Sure, sure. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yes, Rishabh, let's begin.
I would like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Neeraj Hatekar, Dr. Aditi Sawant, who is the head of the economics department here at St. Xavier's College, and the students present here on behalf of the Eco Circle. The Eco Circle has three departments: Arthniti, which is the official research journal of the Department of Economics, EcoSem, the annual economics seminar conducted by the department, and Eco Declassified, the official newsletter of the department. Now, I would like to request our head of department, Dr. Aditi Sawant, to address us.
Thank you, Rishabh. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to today's guest, Professor Neeraj Hatekar. Dr. Hatekar, thank you very much for accepting our request to deliver today's lecture on the topic regression master class. Professor Hatekar taught me when I was pursuing masters from Mumbai University. Sir shares a long association with the Department of Economics at St. Xavier's College. He has been on the board of studies of our department, especially for the subject of econometrics. A couple of years ago, Sir conducted a series of lectures on basic and advanced econometrics, and the course was open for outsiders also. The special thing about Sir is that his talent is not confined only to academics, but he is known for his social outreaching activities, especially in the area of rural, Adivasi, and tribal development. His love for nature, especially for animals and birds, is well known, and I think that makes him a perfect human being. So many things and so many aspects of this wonderful personality could not be portrayed in such a short period of time. And so, without much ado, I request EcoCircle team to start the program. Thank you so much and all the best.
I would like to say a few words about Dr. Neeraj Hatekar. Uh, Dr. Hatekar is an economist through and through, having pursued his bachelor's, master, and his doctorate in the subject. On completing his doctorate in economics from the University of Mumbai, he joined the Department of Economics at the university, taking on several roles, and is currently the professor of economics, along with being the director of the economics department at the university. Dr. Hatekar has had his papers referred to in several books, like the Indian Economic Journal and the Economic and Political Weekly, among several others. Besides being an academic, Dr. Hatekar takes part in giving back to the community and guiding students who plan on doing a doctorate through. I will now ask Dr. Hatekar to take over the session and address our students.
Thank you so much. Uh, I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
So, we will first start with the basics of a regression model. Okay. So, I'll be sharing my screen with you guys. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So,
I'll just allow you to share the screen.
yeah, please do that.
Yeah. Yes, now you'll be able to share it.
Neeraj sir, I might leave in between. I have another meeting to attend. Okay, so kindly excuse me.
Can you see the screen?
No, sir, we
No.
can't.
Okay. Let me go back and try to share it. Yeah, is my screen visible now?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Is it now visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's think of, say, trying to understand the relationship between the weights and the ages of children. Okay, so suppose you have lots of children, some of them are just 6 months old, some of them are just 1 year old, some of them are 2 years old, there are 3 years old, 4 year olds, 5 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, and so on till about 15-year-olds. And there are lots of children of every age, right? So there are lots of children who are, just 6 months old, lots of children who are 1 year old, and so on. So what you do is you try to find out. So what you realize is, suppose you weigh all the children who are 6 months old, and you realize that their weight is say 4 kilograms. Okay, age, right? So half a year, age in year. Then you realize that the ages of all children who are 1 year are about 6 kg. The weights of all children who are 2 years is say 7 kg. Weight of all children who are say 3 years is say 9 kilograms. Average, right? So the average weight of all 6-month-year-olds, the average weight of all 1-year-olds, this is the average weight of all 2-year-olds, this is the average weight of all 3-year-olds, and so on. So you have data like this. Yes, so is this clear to everybody? This is what we are trying to do. Okay. So now, what I want to do is I want to describe this relationship graphically. So what I do is I draw a x and a y axis. Here I write the age of the child, and here I write the average weight. I'm sorry, I'm writing it on the mobile, so my handwriting will all be wonky. Okay, so the y-axis you have the average weight, on the x-axis you have the age, right? So if you, for example, age in years, so this is say the half a year, right? Okay, so from your data you found that the average weight of half a year is say our 6-month-old child, that is half-year-old child, was how much did we say it was?
4 kg.
2 kg.
So I write 4 kg here, right? Now average weight of a 1-year-old child, how much did we say it was?
6 kgs.
6 kg. So we write 6. So we get a dot here, we get a dot here, right? We join all these dots. Okay. So what does this line tell you? It tells you that once you know the age of a child, this line will tell you what is the average weight of children who are that old, right? Sure. So there is somebody. So for example, if you draw a line for here 3, and if you go here, then this tells you what is the average age of a child who is 3 years old. Okay. Now this is called the conditional mean, right? So what you're trying to write is the conditional mean weight of a child, conditional on his or her age, is given by this line. So we call this the conditional mean function, the CMF. Is that clear to everybody? What does the conditional mean function describe? Yeah, is everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what
Sir,
does it?
could you repeat it once again, please?
Yeah, so the conditional mean function tells you. So for example, what does this graph tell you? That if you take a child who is just half a year old, the average weight of all children who are half a year old is 4 kilos. The average weight of all children who are just 1 year old is 6 kilos. The average weight of all children who are 3 years old is something, right? That we are seeing in the data. So how much was it? It was 9 kilos, right? It is 9 kilos and so on. Sure. Right. So what does this line tell you? It tells you that if you take a child of a particular age, this on the x-axis, this line will tell you on the y-axis what is the average weight of children of that age. Yeah, is this clear? Okay, folks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So is this clear? Absolutely. So therefore, this line tells you what is the conditional average or the conditional mean. Conditional mean weight of a child depending upon the child's age. That's why condition. Okay, so we call it the conditional mean function. Okay, right? Now, let me introduce you to the idea of an expected value and a covariance. Does everybody know the idea of a covariance?
Yes.
Yeah, or not very sure?
Not
Not
very
sure.
Not very sure. Lovely. So let me take you through some very basic statistics now. Okay. Now, suppose we are playing a game. Okay. So we're tossing a coin. And suppose we toss a coin 5 times. And suppose the outcome is like this: head, head, tail, tail, head. Right? So once you toss the coin first, it ended up a head. You toss it again, it was again a head. You toss it third time, it was a tail, again a tail and a head. Now you decide to play the game, right? So every time it's heads, you earn 1 rupee. And every time it's a tail, you lose 1 rupee. So your earnings are 1, 1, minus 1, minus 1, 1. Right? Because, 1 because of the first toss, it was a head. So you won 1 rupee. Second time also when the coin was tossed, it was a head. So you earned 1 rupee. Third time when the coin was tossed, it was a tail. So you lost 1 rupee. Fourth time it was a toss, it was again a tail, so you lost 1 rupee. Fifth time around, it was again a head, so you won 1 rupee and so on, right? So this is the sequence of earnings. So 1, 1, minus 1, minus 1, 1. Is this clear?
Yes,
Yeah?
sir.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So now suppose I were to ask you the question. You played this game 5 times, 3 times you won, 2 times you lost. So suppose I ask you, what is your earning per toss? Or what is your average earning? What are your average earnings here? Yeah? Your total earnings is how much in this game?
1 rupee, sir.
1.
1 rupee.
1 rupee. How many times did you play the game?
5.
So what should be your average earnings?
0.2.
0.2, right? Okay, so let's now understand that a little bit. Okay, so we'll think of the average earning as X bar. Okay, which can be written as 1 plus 1 plus 1 minus 1 minus 1 upon 5, right? I took all the pluses on one side, minus 1 on one side. Yeah, but this is nothing but 3 into 1 upon 5 plus 2 into minus 1 upon 5, right? Which is nothing but 3 by 5 into 1 plus 2 by 5 into minus 1, right? So here is plus 1. Now there are 2 parts to this. There is a value 1 and minus 1. What does 1 mean? That when you toss the coin, it was heads and you won 1 rupee, so it's 1, positive 1. What does minus 1 mean? You tossed the coin and it was a tail, so you lost 1 rupee, right? So basically, every time you toss a coin, you know that it could be either plus 1 or minus 1. But can you ever say before the coin has fallen on the ground that it will be always either plus 1 or minus 1? You can't, right? Hello?
No, sir.
No. So once you toss a coin, think of a coin hanging in the air, okay, and you can just say head or tail. But you know one thing, Saurav Ganguly once clearly in a match when he went out to toss, and Steve Boy has written about this. When he tossed the coin, in the same breath rapidly said head, tail, and whenever the coin fell down, he just picked it up, put it into his pocket, and said we'll bat, right? But of course, unless you're going to do that, right? Once you toss a coin, you never know whether it's going to be head or tail. So therefore, what you have is 2 possible outcomes, plus 1 or minus 1. each with a probability. This time it's a balanced coin, so each with a probability 0.5, 0.5, right? Okay. Such outcomes, such variables are called random variables. So they are outcomes of a chance experiment. Okay, numerical valued outcomes of a chance experiment. So a chance experiment is an experiment whose outcome you can't foretell beforehand. It is just, it could be any one, it is one among a many possible sets of outcomes. You can say that only some of them will occur with certain probabilities, but you can't ever say that this is what the outcome is. Right? Such variables are called random variables, and they're very important in statistics. So what you have here is +1 is one value of the random. -1 is another value of the random. Right? So this random variable takes two values, +1 and -1. 3/5 is what is called the relative frequency of +1. Why is it called relative frequency? Because thrice out of 5 times you got the +1. Right? So therefore relative frequency. You played the game 5 times, 3 times you got a head. So therefore relative frequency head is 3/5. And the relative frequency of a tail is 2/5. Right? So if you multiply this out, you'll actually get 1/5 is 0.2. Okay. Is it clear to everybody? Which is nothing but the sample mean, which is called X bar, which is the mean. Okay. Now the mean itself is a random variable. Why? Because if you toss the same coin 5 times, will you again get 0.2 as the mean? Not necessary, no? Yeah, is everybody following me?
Yes, sir.
Sure. So you realize that next time I toss 5 coins, it's not necessary that I'll get 0.2 as X bar. Because I got X bar because I got 3 heads and 2 tails, but I can get 2 heads, 3 tails, whatever, right? So I can get another value. Okay. So I can't ever say, so therefore the sample mean is also a random variable. Okay. So now think of X bar. Okay. Which is X bar is what? Relative frequency of a random variable into that value plus another value of the random variable into its relative frequency is what gives you X bar, the sample mean. So by and large, the sample mean is, okay, by and large, the sample mean is X bar equals relative frequency of I into Xi, right? I goes from 1 to n. Okay. So you take each value of the random variable multiplied by its relative frequency, the number of times it has occurred related to the total number of times. Multiply each value by that sum, and you get the relative frequency. So you get essentially the X bar. This is clear. So is the idea of sample mean clear to everybody, or any mean in general? Okay. Now, suppose instead of tossing this coin, so first when I tossed it only 5 times, the relative frequency of a head was 3/5. The 60% times there were heads, and 40% times there were tails when I tossed it 5 times. Now suppose I toss this coin not 5 times, but say I get a machine and toss it 50,000 times. Okay, 50,000 times. So when I do it 50,000 times, would I still expect to get heads 60% of the times and tails 40% of the times? Yeah, what do you guys think? No, right?
Close to 50%, like half.
You would expect them to be closer to 50%, right? Okay. So what will happen is, if I think of a sample of size n, and as n tends to infinity, right, this relative frequency 3/5 will get closer and closer to 0.5, which is the probability of getting 1. This number 2/5 will get closer and closer to 0.5, which is the probability of getting -1. So this X bar n will take closer and closer to 0. Yeah, because it is 0.5 into 1 plus 0.5 into -1. Sure. So as the sample size becomes larger and larger and larger, relative frequencies will get closer and closer to the probabilities, respective probabilities. Okay, fine. Okay, so if you replace the relative frequencies by the probability, so instead of writing, okay, instead of writing relative frequency of 1 into 1 plus relative frequency of -1 into -1, which is x bar, which is 0.2 in this case. If you write, my God, hold on. If you write probability x is equal to 1 into 1 plus probability x is equal to -1 into -1, right? Then this quantity is what is called the expected value of the random variable, and which in this case is 0, right? Because you've got, this is 0.5, this is 0.5, so 0.5 into 1 plus 0.5 into -1 is 0, right? So the expected value of x is 0. Sure. So even though you've tossed the coin just 5 times, if the sample mean is actually 0.2, if the sample size becomes larger and larger and larger, your sample mean will get closer and closer to 0. 0 in this case is the expected value, and you get expected value by multiplying each value of the random variable by its respective probabilities. You get the sample mean by multiplying each value of the random variable by its relative frequency. You get the expected value by multiplying each value of the random variable by its relative its probability. Okay, right? Is this clear? So is the difference between an expected value and the sample mean clear to everybody? Yeah? Hello?
Yeah, yes.
Yes,
Yes,
this
sir.
clear? So can you summarize this to me? What is the difference between x bar and expected value of x?
So from what I've understood, the expected value of x is it doesn't follow the exact probability. So you've used the relative frequency in that case, and it's generally for when you have a smaller sample size. But for the mean, you're imagining that it's an infinite sample, so it follows the probability, and that's why it's like
We
always
must turn it exactly the other way around. The mean is each value of the variable 1 and -1 in this case multiplied by their relative frequencies, right? If you take each value of the random variable and multiply it by its relative frequencies and sum, then you get the mean. But if you make the sample size, if you keep on doing this experiment many times, if the sample size becomes larger, what happens is the relative frequencies get closer and closer to probabilities. Okay, so 3 by 5 gets closer and closer. Number of proportion of heads, which was 60% when you toss it just 5 times, gets closer and closer to 0.5 as the sample size becomes larger and larger and larger, right? So therefore, in the end, if you really made your sample infinitely large, your relative frequencies would turn into probabilities, right? And what you would get is probability of getting 1 into 1 plus probability of getting -1 into -1. That is each value of the random variable multiplied not by its relative frequency, but by its probability. This limiting value is called the expected value. Is this clear to everybody? Now?
yes.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I had a question about
Yeah.
this. So this example would be considered when we have two variables, a heads and a tails, -1 and +1. What
Right.
happens when we have multiple variables like that?
Yeah, so for example, if you are rolling the die, right? Okay, and your die could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now suppose if you roll this 5 times, right? And suppose you get the following 1, 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, fine. And suppose I give you 1 rupee if it rolls over. So if you did this, then the relative frequency of 1 is 2/5 into 1 plus 1/5 into 3 plus 1/5 into 4 plus 1/5 into 5, right? That would be x bar. Sure? Okay, folks?
Yes.
But if you kept on repeating this infinitely many times, then you know all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all are likely to occur. None of this, it's not possible that some of them will not occur, right? Because it's a balanced die, right? Okay. So if you keep on doing this infinitely many times, then the expected value of x will be 1 into the probability of 1, which is 1 by 6, because all the 6 outcomes are equally likely. 2 into 1 by 6 plus 3 into 1 by 6 plus 4 into 1 by 6 plus 5 into 1 by 6 plus 6 into 1 by 6. Is this clear? So
Yes.
this
Yes,
is
sir.
the value. This would be the x bar. And remember, x bar would keep on changing, because if you roll the die again 5 times, you will get a different set of numbers. Yeah. So x bar will change, and therefore x bar is an outcome of a chance experiment, because every time you do the experiment, you get a different value of x bar. But expected value of x is not the outcome of a chance experiment. Expected value of x will not change anytime you, because 1 by into 1 by 6 plus 2 into 1 by 6, 3 into 1 by 6 plus 4 into 1 by 6 plus 5 into 1 by 6 plus 6 into 1 by 6 will remain unchanged. How many ever times you do this experiment? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So x bar is a random variable. Expectation x is not. But expectation x is also that value to which x bar would get closer and closer and closer as the sample size becomes larger and larger and larger. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what we can say is expected value of x is limit as n tends to infinity of x bar n, right? So x value of x is the limit to which the sample mean tends as the sample size becomes larger and larger and larger. Are you so is that of an expected value clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
So can you quickly summarize what it means? What is the expected value? So what is x bar? It is each value of the random variable. Okay, first start one thing. What is a random variable?
Random variable, excuse me, sir. Random variable is one where the outcome cannot be predetermined.
Yeah, but the outcome is a numeric outcome. Okay.
Okay.
So numeric valued outcome which cannot be predetermined, but which follows a probability distribution, right? That is a random variable.
Okay.
Now, what is the mean? What is the mean value?
It's the average of the samples,
No,
like
the
whatever
value of
observations are there.
multiplied by its relative frequency, right? So if you toss a coin 5 times, you get 3 ones, 2 minus 1. So 3 into 5 into 1 plus 2 into 5, 2 into 5 into minus 1, right? Okay, that is the relative frequency. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what is the expected value?
So the expected value would be the final outcome in a case when the sample size tends to infinity and it is an ideal condition. That is why the relative frequency becomes the probability of the random variable.
No, it doesn't have to do anything with ideal conditions. It always, right?
Okay.
Okay,
So,
I mean, if you
excuse me, but if the sample size is infinite, then it will become the probability, right? So wouldn't that be ideal?
yeah, so it will necessarily become the probability, no?
Okay. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So basically, we have an important result now which says that as the sample size becomes large, x bar, the sample mean tends to expectation x. Now the expectation x is the population value, right? The mean value of the whole population. So for example, now look at it this way. If I ask you to find the average income of a person in Mumbai, right? How much does a person earn in Mumbai? Right. Actually, there is a value, right? So if you actually went to every person and asked them how much they earn and then added that up and divided by total number of people, you get a value, which will not be an outcome of a chance experiment, right? So if you do it again and again and again, given that nothing else changes, you will get the same figure. Yeah. Right. Like for example, if you wanted to find the average weight of a student in your college, then suppose you put all the students into that hall that you have, lock the hall from outside, and then weighed every student and then divided it by the number of students, you will get a number. If you did the whole thing again, you will get the same number, right? If you did the whole thing again, you will get the same number, right? So expectation X, which is a population mean in that sense, okay, is not a random variable, right? The population mean is not a random variable. Is this clear? Whereas if you take a sample mean, so if you pick up, say, some 10, 15 students at random from your college and then weigh them, you'll get a particular value, right? Which will be the sample mean. If you took another 15 students, will you get the same value? No, you'll get another value, right? So just like in the coin tossing experiment, X bar kept on changing from sample to sample. The average weight of your sample, average weight of children in your sample will keep on changing if you take different samples. But if you kept on increasing the sample, right, ultimately you will run over all the college, all the students in the college will be exhausted, and therefore the sample mean that you have will be the same as the population mean. Yeah. In the real world, you know, most populations are so large that you can't never run through them. So therefore, all that we say is as n becomes large, the sample mean gets closer and closer to the population mean, right? Which is the expected value of X. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, everybody understands this. This is a very important theorem called the law of large numbers, which says as the sample size increases, the sample mean gets closer and closer to the population mean. The expected value of X is nothing but the population mean, because that's nothing but what the sample size gets when the sample becomes infinitely large. That is for the whole population. You cover the whole population. Is this clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So law of large numbers is essentially it's a very important building block of all that I'm going to say. So remember, the law of large numbers says that as the sample size becomes larger and larger and larger, the sample mean gets closer and closer to the population mean. So it says, for example, if you kept on increasing the number of people who you are taking in your sample, right, then their average income that you get will get closer and closer to the actual income of a Mumbaiker, right? As the sample size, as number of people you include in your sample keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Yes.
Everybody gets this idea?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you see, the sample mean, the mean in statistics is a very useful idea. For example, you must have been taught that there is something called a mean and there is measure of central tendency. There is something called a measure of dispersion, right? Yeah. And those are supposed to be different things, but they aren't really different things. Okay. Fine. They are actually the same. For example, the variance is also a mean. Can you see how a variance is also a mean really?
So
Can
not
somebody
sure how we would derive a variance from expected value. Sorry.
No, but the variance is actually a kind of a mean. Why am I saying this?
So,
What's the formula for the variance? Can you tell me the formula for the variance? Yeah, does anybody remember the formula for the variance?
Sigma x minus x bar the whole square upon n.
N, right? So what do? I do x1 minus x bar square plus x2 minus x bar square plus x3 minus x bar square upon 3, right? Sure?
Yes, sir.
Hello? So what am I doing? I'm adding 3 quantities and dividing by 3. Yeah?
yeah, so
So that's a mean, no? Because if I add, say, n quantities and divide by n, I got a mean, no?
yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
excuse me. So is variance from the coin tossing example that you gave? So is variance the a number from which how far away it is from the actual mean or like the
Yes.
expected
So
value?
variance essentially, so if you think of x1 minus x bar square as the distance of x1 from x bar, right? If you think of x2 minus x bar square as the distance of x2 from x bar, yeah? And if you think of x3 minus x bar square as the distance of x3 from x bar, then the numerator is the addition of all the 3 distances. So it is the distance of x1 from x bar plus the distance of x2 from x bar plus the distance of x3 from x bar. And you add them and divide by 3. So what you really have is the average distance of an observation from x bar. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, right. The variance is nothing but an average distance. Okay, the variance is nothing but an average distance. Okay, average distance of so if you have a number of data points and suppose x bar is the mean of that data point, if you are interested in knowing if I picked up a number at random, how far that number will be from the mean, then the variance gives you that answer, because it says on an average, this is the distance by which an average observation in this number of in this collection of numbers differs from them. Right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. So average, a variance is nothing but an average only. Okay, just remember. So basically, now a little bit of conceptual, notation. So if I write x bar, which is summation xi upon n, limit as n tends to infinity, limit n tends to infinity as expectation x, right? This is how we said we'll write. Now, I'm saying that variance of x is summation xi minus x bar square upon n. So what should I write it as? So remember, when I wrote this, okay, if I write limit, so suppose I want to write this also as an expected value. Okay. So if I wrote x bar is expectation of x, I must write this as expectation of x minus expectation x the whole square. Yeah. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. So ideally, we are taking, like you explained, for variance, we are taking the distance between x and the expected value of x, right?
Right. Exactly. So we're looking at the
Okay.
average distance from x and expected value. Right, because that's what we're interested in. When you write the variance, we are looking at the average distance of x from x bar, or average distance of x from expectation x, if you write it as an expected value operator. Right? And how do you think of the distance? X minus expectation x square. So you write it as the average value of x minus expectation x square, but the average value is nothing but the expected value as n tends to infinity. So you write this like this: x minus expectation x the whole square. Is this right? Yeah, is everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
Hello? I think some of you are confused. If you're confused, please ask me.
Sir, little confused.
Huh. So basically, let me go through this again. See, if I want to write limit n tends to infinity, summation xi upon n, I said I will write it as expected value of x, right? So I've dropped the summation operator, this n part is gone. Yeah? Now I'm interested in writing the average value of the deviations from the expected value, right? So if x is a variable, minus expected value of x is its distance from its expected value. This is the square, and this is the expected value, right? So this should give me as n tends to infinity. This is give me limit as n tends to infinity, summation xi minus x bar square upon n should be this whole thing. Dulari? Yeah? Okay?
Yes, sir.
Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir, just to confirm once again,
Yes.
variance is the average distance between x and expected value of x, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So we write it as an expected value, right? Now because, okay, so this is the variance, okay, right. Now you have xi minus x bar square upon n. Instead of that, suppose you have x1 minus x bar, y1 minus y bar plus x2 minus x bar, y2 minus y bar, plus say x3 minus x bar, y3 minus y bar, and so on. So instead of having x1 minus x bar into x1 minus x bar, think of the other x1 as another variable called y. Right? So your formula for variance would then become summation xi minus x bar yi minus y bar upon n, right? So it becomes the average value of the product of the deviations from the mean. Is this clear? So you take the difference between x1, the first value of x and the mean of x, the first value of y and the mean of y, then you multiply the two. Then you take the distance between the second value of x and the mean of x, and the second value of y and the mean of y, and then you multiply them. Like that you do for all the pairs. If you add them and then divide by the number of pairs, then you would get the average value of the product of the deviations from the mean. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, everybody understood this idea?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, now suppose you do this. Suppose I give you some x and y, right? Say x1, you take x1, x2, x3, x4, y1, y2, y3, y4. You calculate the mean of x, you calculate the mean of y. Then you calculate x1 minus x bar, you calculate y1 minus y bar, you multiply the two. Then you calculate x2 minus x bar, you calculate y2 minus y bar, multiply the two. You calculate x3 minus x bar, y3 minus y bar, multiply the two. You calculate x4 minus x bar, y4 minus y bar, multiply two. Add all of them, divide by 4, and if you find that the resultant quantity is negative, you get a minus sign. What you get, the answer you get as a minus sign. What does that mean? What should that tell you intuitively? Yeah, folks, what should that tell you intuitively?
The two variables have an inverse relationship. There's a
Exactly, because
correlation.
when would that number be negative? When the numerator is negative, no?
Yes, sir.
And when will the numerator be negative? When a lot of times x1 minus x bar and y1 minus y bar, or x minus x bar and y minus y bar have opposite signs. Only then will the numerator be negative.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But what does that mean? That means that most of the times if x is more than x bar, y is less than y bar. Or if y is more than y bar, x is less than x bar. That's why the signs are negative and therefore the product is negative, right?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So therefore the number is negative to tell you that most of the times when x is above its mean, y must be below its mean and vice versa. Yeah, so this number is called the covariance between x and y. Yeah, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So if you write variance as, if you write variance of x as, right? You write covariance between xy like this. So one of the xi minus x bars, you substitute as yi minus y bar. Is this clear? Yeah, folks?
Yes, sir.
So what
Yes,
would you
sir.
say if this number is positive? What would you say?
They have a direct relationship. As x would increase, y would.
So as x becomes better, higher than its mean, y also becomes higher than its mean.
Okay.
Right? So related to their own mean, x. So for example, if you are looking at say children and weights, right? Okay, or say maybe or maybe you're looking at the growth of plants, right? And the amount of so x is the growth at which different plants have been growing for the last 1 year. Different mango saplings have grown for the last 1 year. And suppose y is the amount of fertilizer that you put in. If you find that the covariance is positive, it would mean that if plants which get more than average fertilizer also tend to grow more than average faster. Right? Plants who are growing less than average are also likely to have got less than average fertilizer. Yeah, that's what it means. Okay. Sure, folks?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So now we could, just like we wrote variance of x as expected value of whole square. Now you write expected value of x minus expectation x, y minus expectation y, right? So instead of 1x minus expectation x, it will become y minus expectation y. Yeah, this is called covariance of xy. Is this clear? Right? Yeah, folks, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, everybody's following this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now let's come back to a regression line. Okay. So now what we have is, we have written the expected value of y given x. So what we really had is that, if you remember this, we had this line, right? Age here, weight as a function of age, right? So what I'm really writing is the mean of y, that is the mean weight, conditional upon x taking a particular value, age, right? So if x is half a year, then there's a particular value which you get. If x is 1 year, there's a particular value which you get, right? Okay, and that value is given by a straight line, right? So this relationship is straight line. So I write it as alpha plus beta xi, right? Expectation of y, condition mean of y given x is equal to xi is alpha plus beta xi, right? Okay, this is the conditional mean function. Conditional mean function, alpha plus beta xi. And I've assumed that that's linear because, and that's why I'm assuming that's linear because we're going to study the linear regression model. So the first assumption I'm making is I'm saying that the conditional mean of y given x is a linear function of x. It is alpha plus beta xi. It could also have been like this, it could have been like this, and so on, but I'm assuming it is like this. Okay, right? So I have got this expected value y given x equal to xi is alpha plus beta xi, right? This is a very important idea. So I hope everybody's got this. Have you guys got this? Understood this idea?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So then now think of this. So I have this line, right? What does this line tell me? If x is equal to x1, then this tells me what would be the expected y given x is equal to x1, right? So for example, for a child who is 6 months old, right, the average weight of such children is about 3 kilos, right? Is what we have sort of found from this. But suppose I have 15 children who are half a year old, right? Will every single half a year old child, 6-month-old child weigh exactly 3 kilos? Yeah?
No.
No, sir.
So they might actually be distributed around this, right? Some of them might weigh 5 kilos, some of them might weigh 2 kilos, so on, right? Sure. If I have a 5-year-old and the average weight of a 5-year-old is 7 kilos, not all 5-year-olds are exactly 7 kilos. Some of them might be more, some of them might be less, right? Okay. But the important point is that how much more they weigh. For example, this child, say we'll call it, say, Bunny. Our Bunny weighs 12 kilos, right? So he's 5 kilos overweight, right? So he weighs 5 kilos more than the average child of his age, 5 years, weighs, right? Now the point is, this extra 5 that Bunny has got, does it have anything to do with Bunny's age?
No, sir.
Yeah?
No.
No, because it is, what is that 5? That 5 is the average, the excess weight that Bunny has. Heavier, Bunny is 12 kilos, whereas the average child who is 5 years is 7 kilos, right? So this 5 years, extra 5 kilos are nothing to do with bunny's age, because the average weight for its children is 7 kilos, where bunny is 12 kilos. So it means it has to do something with a factor which is nothing to do with age. Yeah, sure. So if I wanted to write bunny's weight, I will say yi. Suppose yi is bunny, right? The ith observation is bunny, which I will say is the average weight for all children who are bunny's age. If you put that 5 here, you will get this, plus a special error component which describes something which is peculiar to bunny, has nothing to do with x. So what I'm saying is bunny's weight is the average weight for children who are bunny's age, which is given by this line function, this part, which is 7, plus this part, ei, right, which is 5, and this 5 is something which has nothing to do with x, right, which is independent of x. Is this absolutely clear? So this is now bunny's weight. This is not a weight of an average child who is bunny's age, but this is bunny's specific age, which is equal to the average weight of children who are bunny's age, but plus something which is peculiar to bunny. Is this absolutely clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So yi is alpha plus beta xi plus ei, right? Okay. So now this is the regression function. Okay. This is the regression function. It tells you how, basically it says that the particular value of y, it consists of two components. One is the conditional mean of y, given a particular value of x, right? So for example, if you think of people who have got, say, 15 years of college education, and the average earnings of a 15 person who has got 15 years of college education is, say 50,000 rupees a month. And suppose Suresh also went to college. He had 15 years of education, but unfortunately got into drugs and didn't really do much with himself. So Suresh earns only 10,000 rupees a month, right? So these will be Suresh's earnings. This will be the average earnings of those who have got the same level of education as Suresh. And this is something which is peculiar to Suresh, that he got into drugs, right? And this has nothing to do with how much educated Suresh is or not educated. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, folks. Okay. So now what will this beta tell you? Yeah, what does this beta tell you? If you look at this graph,
The slope of
yeah, so it says how much the average weight of a child increases if the child's age increases by 1 year, right? So it tells you that, for example, it tells you that the average weight of a 5-year-old is 7 kilos. Then if you increase age by 1 year, it tells you the average weight of a 6-year-old is 8 kilos. So basically the change must be 1, right? So it tells you how the average weight of a child of a particular age increases as his age changes, or how much does the average earnings of people change as their level of education increases by 1 year, right? Is this clear? Yeah, folks,
Yes, sir.
understanding this?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
beta tells you how much does the conditional mean change as x changes by 1 unit. Okay. And let's find out how we can find the value of beta. Okay. Sure. Right. So now I have this regression function. Okay. Let me now find the covariance of yi with xi. Okay. Let me find the covariance of, but up to this point, is everybody crystal clear? No confusion?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, give me an example. Like I gave you 2. So give me an example to explain what beta is. Think of an example on your own.
So, may I give an example?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, if we are determining the life expectancy of people living in a particular area, or as life expectancy changes as the place changes, and in that case we can determine the average life expectancy of an area. But in a case where a person in a case where there is more pollution or something like that, that could be the error component that decreases life expectancy, or like a
No, so suppose
place.
you're looking at it like this. So we're looking at it like this, right? If you're looking at a problem like this, so let's reconstruct your model. So we are trying to understand the life expectancy of a person as a result of his or her genetic characteristics, right? So people who are children of long-lived parents would often live long. Yeah, people who are not children of, people whose parents have also died early typically die early, right? Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
what you try to do is you're trying to find out yi as alpha plus beta xi, where xi is the average length at which one's parents have lived, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and say ei could be something else. So, for example, a person could uh, die early because that person is a smoker, even when that person's parents were long lived. Yeah, so ei would be something peculiar to that person, right?
Okay.
And
Yes, sir.
obviously, ei would have nothing to do with the genetics of this person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and then what would beta tell you?
Beta would tell us how much does the uh, person's age changes with every change in the parents' life
So,
expect
so it says on an average.
on an average.
On an average, if parents have lived 1 year longer, how much do people on an average live? How much longer do people on average live? Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, for example, if yi is the marks you scored and xi is the number of hours you study, right? Okay. So obviously, people who study on average just 1 hour in the semester get few marks. People who study say 5 hours in the semester get a little bit more marks. People who study on an average 6 hours a day, right, will get even more marks, and so on. Yeah. So, for example, think of a person who has studied 6 hours a day, but suppose that person is very, very intelligent. So his marks would have two components. One is coming from the fact that he has studied 6 hours a day. So that would be the average marks of people who study 6 hours a day. And EI would be something which is peculiar to that person particularly smart person. So he gets more marks than the average. Yeah, sure. And beta would tell you that if a person were to study an additional 1 hour, on an average, how many additional marks does he or she get? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and alpha would be obviously if you studied 0 hours, right? If you didn't go to college at all, if you never looked at your books and all, they just walked into the exam, right? Where x would be 0, alpha would be the marks that you would get that time, right? And alpha
Yes,
could
sir.
be 0, or because your teachers never, generally if you written something down, don't give you a 0, you'll get some marks, right? So that would be alpha. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So we can say that beta is the rate of change of the marks you get, which depends upon the amount of time you study.
Yeah, but on an average, not for a particular individual. On an
Okay.
average.
So we say on an average because there can be peculiar cases like you mentioned in the EI variable, right?
Yeah, so EI would refer to a particular person. So, for example, if this person who is very bright, okay, if he studied 1 hour more, actually would get much more marks than somebody who was not that bright but just studied an equal number of hours, right?
Yes,
So,
sir.
therefore, this beta would refer to the average increase in marks. If on an average, if you have to increase your, uh, your study effort by 1 hour. So if all the students increase their study effort by 1 hour and everybody would get, some would get more marks, somebody would get even more marks. If you average that, that figure would be the beta. So this is not hold for one particular individual. It's an average. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Everybody's got this?
Yes.
Okay. So let's now decide how to calculate alpha and beta, because those are very important numbers. Yeah. So covariance yi xi can be written as covariance of yi with xi can be written as covariance of xi with this whole quantity, because this is nothing but yi. So if I want to find the covariance of x with y, I must find the covariance of x with this whole term, right? Sure?
Yeah.
So I must write, this must become covariance of xi with alpha plus beta xi plus ei. Okay. This can be written as covariance of alpha xi plus covariance of beta xi plus covariance of ei xi. Right? Sure?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This is yi. Okay? Fine. Now first let's get something out of it. Alpha is a constant, no?
Yes.
So it has nothing to, it doesn't vary with x because it's a constant number. Right? Like for example, if I drew this graph, this is alpha, the intercept. It doesn't depend upon the value of x. It's a fixed number, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So this would be 0. Okay? Covariance of alpha with xi would be 0 because alpha is a constant, xi is not a constant. So if you wanted to find the covariance of constant with a variable, you'd write summation alpha minus alpha bar xi minus x bar upon n, right? But alpha and alpha bar would be the same because alpha doesn't change. So if it's the same number, if alpha is all the same numbers, if you take the average, that would exactly be the same, right? What is the average of 10, 10, 10?
10,
10. So what would be 10 minus 10?
0.
0, right? So this part would be 0, sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this part would be 0. Similarly, this part, covariance of ei and xi would also be 0 because, for example, Bobby is overweight, but that has nothing to do with his age, right? Yeah, or
Right.
Manish is a very
Yes,
smart
sir.
person. Manish gets lots of marks, but that extra marks he gets because if you factor out the, because that, so EI specifically that part of Manish's marks which he has got when you take out the effect of his studying for 6 hours, right? Because that is something peculiar to Manish. So it has nothing to do with the number of hours that he studies. So this part will also be 0, right? Sure. Is everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we're coming to a very important line now. So covariance yi xi is covariance beta xi xi. Okay? Right? Because this part is 0, this part is clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's now see what is covariance beta xi xi. So that formula would be beta xi minus beta xr xi minus x bar upon n, right? Sure?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here you take the beta common. So you'll get xi minus x bar square upon n. Yeah, if you can take beta out of the bracket, put it here. Got this?
Yes, sir.
So we have an important idea here, which is covariance of yi xi is beta into the variance of xi. Right? Because this is nothing but the variance of xi. Yeah?
Yes.
So beta is nothing but covariance of yi xi upon the variance of xi. Yeah? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, what is the formula? So in a particular sample, okay, this will be the population value, no? Because this is expected values and all that. But if you have a particular sample, then obviously you'll not get covariance of yi, but you'll have a formula for that. Xi minus x bar, yi minus y bar upon n by summation xi minus x bar upon n, right? You're likely to have data from a sample, and therefore what you're going to get is sample estimates rather than the population value, right? So n will cancel, and to denote the difference you write as beta hat. So you get the formula for beta hat is summation xi minus x bar yi minus y bar upon summation xi minus x bar square. Is this clear?
Yes.
Everybody's got this?
So could you please explain the beta hat part once again?
Yeah. You see, so beta is equal to covariance y except on variance xi, right?
Yes, sir.
Sure. But covariance in this case is nothing but the population covariance, no? So it is the expected value form, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But expected is when you have an infinitely large sample, right? But
Yes, sir.
typically what we have is finite samples. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for a finite sample, your x bar. So for a finite sample, the formula is, for a small sample, the formula for covariance summation xi minus x bar into yi minus y bar upon n, right?
Yes, sir.
And for variance is xi minus x bar upon n. So n will cancel. The point is, if you take a different sample now, these numbers will change, right? So you'll get a different beta hat.
Yes, sir.
So this beta hat, because you have a sample, beta hat will keep on changing from sample to sample. Beta hat will be a random variable. Unlike the true beta, which is the population beta, which is not a random variable. Like the population mean is not a random variable, population covariance is not a random variable, population variance is not a random variable. So population beta is not a random variable, but the sample beta based on a sample is a random variable, right? Because if you take different samples, you will get different values of beta hat every time. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, everybody's got this?
So I have a question.
Yes.
So when do we take n minus 1 for the variance? Isn't that when we use the sample?
No, you see, when do we fit n minus 1? So basically, the point is, so idea of degrees of freedom. You know, what is the degrees of freedom? Degrees of freedom is the amount of information that is there. So we have a set of data points, right? And suppose these data points are to be used to estimate, form a guess about some quantity out there, right? Okay. And so suppose you want to understand the income of a Mumbaiker, again, average income of a Mumbai, right? So you get out of your college, okay, stand in the middle of the divider, and there are people passing randomly by. So you ask the first person, how much do you earn? He says, I earn 5,000 rupees a month, because he's some poor person. So you say, okay, let me think of this 5,000 as, this is one bit of information I have about how much people in Mumbai earn. So I say, I'm going to just restrict myself to this one bit of information I have. I'm going to say an average Mumbaiker earns 5,000 rupees a month, because I asked one person, he says 5,000. Right? You'll be very unhappy with this, because this is going to be a estimate which is very unreliable. Yeah? Because
Yes.
next person can be earning 5 lakh rupees a month. Yeah? So you say, no. So here currently you just have one degree of freedom. One bit of information on which your estimate is based. Right? Now,
Yes.
suppose you say this is not good enough. Let me ask one more person. So somebody is going in a car, and if you ask him, and he says, I earn 95,000 a month. So you add the two, and you say it is average is 50,000, right? So the average income for Mumbaikar is 50,000 rupees a month. So you would say that the second observation is twice as reliable as the first, because you use twice as much information. Yeah, everybody gets this? There are two independent bits of information now. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So now the degrees of freedom here is 2. Now suppose you're standing there and two teachers come out of your college. They're friends and they're going home. They're going to catch the same train, and they actually were in school together. So they passed out of their master's program together. They joined the college on the same day. So today they are earning exactly the same amount, right? So today, suppose both of them are earning 60,000. So you now have actually observed 4 people, right? Okay. But this one person is exactly, one of them is redundant, right?
Yeah, to some
Or say,
extent.
look at it this way. I want to ask you, what is the time right now? Okay, the time in my watch shows 5:19, but obviously it need not be perfect, right? It could be a few minutes here and there. So I said, let me not just depend on this watch. Let me also ask you, and you say it's 5:20, say 5:25. Then I say I'll use the average of these two. 2 bits of information is more reliable than 1 bit of information, right? Then I ask the third person. He says it is 5:30, but he says 5:30 because he has set his watch 5 minutes faster than the second person. Yeah. So if I know the time on the second person, I know the time on the third person automatically.
Yes.
Or if I know the time on the third person, I know the time on the second person automatically. Right?
Yes, sir.
So here, my information, I can afford to either delete one of them and not much loss will happen to my estimate.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I had a doubt. So,
Yeah.
if the 2 teachers have their monthly salary at 60,000, wouldn't removing one teacher, deleting one teacher's salary affect the overall average? Because
no, because the first teacher is saying, suppose one teacher is saying, so if you ask the person, first you are finding out what is the average income of a Mumbaiker, right? Okay, fine. And now suppose the 2 people have come out. You ask the first one how much you earn, just 60,000, and the second says just as much as the first person, right? Okay, then you have no additional information in taking the second, third person in.
Yeah.
Because the value of the third person is exactly the same as the value of the first person.
So, but I still don't get it. So if we take 95,000 and 5,000, then
So
the average income will be
maybe
50.
because 95 to 5,000 were random people. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Whereas these are not random.
So, but
I think
while
a better idea, or maybe just forget that, a better idea would be this watch example, right? So if my
Yes,
watch
sir.
is 5:19, in your watch is 5:25, and in your friend's watch is 5:30, but it's 5:30 in your watch because he or she has set his watch exactly 5 minutes faster than you.
Yes, sir.
So adding that in my data doesn't, so knowing that fact doesn't give me any additional information, any more reliable information compared to what the time is.
Okay, sir. So if we delete that information, then wouldn't that also affect the sample size? Like, wouldn't we be
No,
reducing
but
that?
will it affect the reliability of my knowledge? Will it increase or decrease my knowledge about what the actual time is?
No.
No, right? That is
Yes,
the whole
sir.
point.
Got
So
it.
whether that is really information or just a number.
I got it, sir. Thank you.
Right. So if it is, the point is, so the degrees of freedom is a number of points which actually convey the actual information. Okay. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the n-1 issue comes, suppose there is population variance and to estimate on the basis of a sample. So I have say x1, x2, x3, say 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So these are 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3. What's the mean of these numbers?
2.
2. Right? So if I were to just tell you that I have, look here, I have 3 numbers here. The mean is 2. The first number is 1 and the second number is 2. Then do I need to tell you what the third number is?
No.
No, because the third number has to be 3 if the mean has to be 2, right?
Yes,
If I
sir.
tell you that I have 3 numbers, the mean of the 3 numbers is 2, the second number is 2 and the third number is 3, then the first number has to be 1, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
similarly, if I tell you that I have 3 numbers, the first number is 1, the last number is 3, I don't know the middle number, but the average of these 3 numbers is 2, then the middle number has to be 2, right? So once I tell you what is the sample mean, then only two of these numbers can actually vary independently. The third number depends upon the first two numbers. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So now, suppose I have the population variance, and suppose I am trying to estimate on the basis of the sample, summation xi minus x bar square upon n. Right. So once I've already fixed x bar, there are not n independent x's, but only n minus 1 independent x's, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there are only n minus 1 independent bits of information that I have, and not n. Yeah, is this clear?
So the one you subtract is the mean, right?
Yeah. So once you subtracted the mean, once you've known what the mean is, once you've determined the mean from the data.
Yes, sir.
Right. Once you determine the mean from the data, then x1, x2, x3, xn are not all independent values. Only x minus n minus 1 of them can vary independently. The nth is fixed like this.
Got it.
So in which case there are only n minus 1 independent observations. Okay. Right. So the denominator should therefore be n minus 1 and not n, because the average should be taken upon divided by the number of independent bits of information that you have. Each of these stands for some bit of information about the variance. This is the average of all those bits. If you average anything, it should be the number of those points that you add up divided by the total number of those points. And how many such independent bits of information that you have? N minus 1. Is this clear to everybody?
Yes, sir. But when do we know when to use n minus 1 and when to use n?
So when you decided to, you found the sample mean from the data, right? Okay, it's only when you've got the sample mean from the data and fixed x bar as summation xi upon n, right? Because summation xi upon n has the property. So if you take summation xi minus x bar, right? If you take summation xi minus x bar, that can be written as summation xi minus summation x bar, which is equal to summation xi minus x bar n times. So that is n x bar, which is summation xi minus n summation xi upon n, and n will cancel. So you will get summation xi minus summation xi is equal to 0. So summation xi minus x bar has the property that sum of the deviations from the mean equals 0. Right? Once you have calculated the mean by this formula. Yeah. So if you're finding the variance, and if you have calculated the sample mean, and then you must remember that you only have n minus 1 independent x's now. Is this clear?
So if in our data there are repeating values, then we use n minus 1.
No, the values can be repeating. That's fine. But those values have to be, repeating values can also be independent sources of data, no?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. So as long as they are redundant, they are not independent sources of data, they have to be, they're independent source of information, they have to be. Like suppose I'm doing sampling with replacement. The same person can come up again and again, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that is an information. But if I say that that my watch is just 5 minutes faster than your watch, then including me in the sample doesn't give you any additional information, including that other person does not give.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So basically, you must be able to find out how many of your data points, you're trying to estimate a parameter, you must be able to know how many of these data points actually represent independent sources of information to know that parameter. Yeah, for example, I want to find out how does a film, how is a film, right? How is a film, right? And suppose I have a friend who actually, so I ask people, right? I want to get an impression of how that film is. So somebody says it's a good film, somebody says a great film, somebody says an average film. This one person says a great film doesn't mean anything because there could be another person who could be saying it's not so great. So the more the number of people I ask, the more the information that I get, right? Okay, but suppose there is somebody who hasn't watched the film, but actually just learnt about the film from. So suppose there is a friend, and he will always blindly believe what his other friend tells him, and his other friend has told him that the film is a great film, so he says it's a great film. Will you, including this person in your sample, give you additional information about different views that people have about how the film is?
No, sir.
No, you must delete this person, right? Whereas I have seen the film, I find it a great film. You have seen the film, you also find it a great film. We two have never met, right? Including you and me, despite both of us saying it's a great film, is useful to tell us what the film is about. Yeah, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, or suppose your class were very, very obedient to your teacher, and you say only your teacher who watched the film, right? Suppose your teacher is the only one who's watched the film called Forrest Gump. How many of you watched Forrest Gump? Anybody watched Forrest Gump?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
sir.
But suppose your teacher is the only person who watched Forrest Gump, and your teacher comes and tells you in the full class that Forrest Gump is a great movie, and all of you have complete faith in your teacher. All of you say Forrest Gump is a great movie. So I have 101 people saying Forrest Gump is a great movie, but only one of them is a useful bit of information, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so I don't have 101 bits of information. I have only one bit of information which can be useful in guessing how I don't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily have to be the teacher. That can be any one student. I can say, okay, one is enough, one is good enough here. Right?
Yes, sir.
Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sure. So basically now I think we are coming close to 5:30. What will probably require one more class to get through this fully. Yeah, so you can decide another. Sometimes you're free, you guys decide among yourself if you think it's worthwhile having another class so that we can complete that regression model fully. I'll be happy to do it. Okay.
So then I will, like, as per your convenience, we will declare one more session
If you
over the
find it to be
weekend or
useful.
something.
If you think it's a waste of time, then don't worry.
No,
Yeah?
so we definitely found it useful.
Okay. No joke. Sure. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, just a minute. Like, now Shrishti would be proposing the vote of thanks, and also soon we would be declaring one more session to complete the entire model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Shrishti, over to you.
Thank you, Harshada, and thank you most importantly, Neeraj Hatikar sir. Thank you for making this session so interactive, and regression is a term that has honestly intimidated so many of us for the longest time, even as students of economics. So thank you for taking us through the basics and the smallest of details and asking us if we understood with such relevant examples. So we really appreciate it. And thank you so much to the Department of Economics, Dr. Aditi Sawant, head of the department, for being so supportive and helping us organize this session. And Hatikar sir, we cannot wait to have another session with you and clarify these concepts and hopefully be less scared the next time we have to deal with them.
Sure.
And once again, just thank you so much for being so involved and making the concepts really
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think I'll get back to you with the feasible date and I'll send you an email.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir. And I think, like, let's do it quite soon so that students don't lose the,
Yes.
they
So
don't
before
get.
you forget.
Yeah. So let's complete it this week only. I'll send you an email.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're muted.
Yeah. Okay. So to all the participants, we would be soon sharing the details of the second session with Sir. So stay like in touch with the department and the Eco Circle. Check out your mail frequently. We would soon complete the session this week itself. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you well. See you.
Bye.